She said, "I need my ex at the wedding for closure. Please be mature." I smiled. The next day, I sent his wife a +1 invite. At the rehearsal dinner, closure became chaos. I'm a pretty straightforward guy. I own a company that does historic building restoration. I like old things, solid foundations, and the simple truth of a plumb line. My life is about structure, integrity, and making sure things that are meant to last do. Which is why the conversation my fiancée Emily started 3 weeks before our wedding felt like an earthquake under a house I thought was built to stand for 100 years. We were finalizing the guest list, a task that was already giving me a headache. She was tapping her pen against the paper, a sure sign she was about to say something calculated. "Babe," she started, her voice a little too casual. "There's one more person I'd like to add." I looked up from the seating chart. "We're already over by 10 people, Em." "Who is it?" She took a breath. "It's Daniel." Daniel, her ex-fiancé. The man she had been with for 6 years before me. The man she had almost married. The man whose ghost had haunted the edges of our entire 4-year relationship. I'd heard his name 1,000 times in 1,000 different stories, always framed as a tragic, beautiful chapter of her past. I put my own pen down and looked at her. "You want to invite your ex-fiancé to our wedding?" "I need him there, Ethan," she said, her voice taking on a tone of patronizing therapy speak. "It's about closure. I need him to see me happy, to see me moving on. It's the final step in closing that door forever. It's for me, and for us. Please just be mature about this. Be mature." 2 of the most manipulative words in the English language. They're a verbal trap, designed to make any objection on my part seem childish and insecure. I looked at her, at the earnest, pleading expression on her face, and I knew this wasn't a request. It was a demand. And it wasn't about closure. It was about something else entirely. It was a power play, a final, public demonstration that her past was still important enough to have a seat at the table of our future. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. An engineer doesn't get mad at a stress test. He just watches the instruments and logs the data. And the data I was logging was telling me that a critical structural failure was imminent. The wedding I had been planning, the future I had been building, it was all a facade. So I smiled. A calm, warm, understanding smile. The one I knew would disarm her completely. "Of course," I said. "I get it. If it's important to you, then it's important to me. Send him an invitation." The relief on her face was so immediate, so absolute, it was almost comical. She gushed about how I was the best, most understanding man in the world. She kissed me, already pulling out her phone, probably to text Daniel the good news. She thought she had handled me, managed my insecurities with her pop psychology nonsense. She had no idea she hadn't just invited her ex to our wedding. She had just handed me the detonator. Update 1. The day after our little closure talk, my operation began. It wasn't an act of rage, it was a project, like any other restoration I'd ever managed. The goal was to expose the rot in the foundation, and then bring the whole unstable structure down in a controlled, spectacular demolition. My first step was to learn everything I could about Daniel. I knew the basics from Emily's stories, but I needed more. I hired a private investigator, a discreet professional I'd used before for due diligence on business partners. I gave him Daniel's full name and last known city of residence. I told him I needed a complete workup, his current personal life, his financial situation, everything. While the PI was working, I focused on the wedding itself. I had access to our shared wedding planning website, the one with the guest list, the vendor contracts, everything. I found Daniel's name, which Emily had already added, along with his address. Then I did something that made me smile. I clicked the Add a +1 button next to his name. The PI called me back 2 days later with a full report, and it was more interesting than I could have ever imagined. Daniel was not the heartbroken, pining artist Emily had always painted him as. He was married, had been for 2 years. His wife's name was Sarah. She was a corporate lawyer, and from her social media presence, she appeared to be a sharp, no-nonsense woman who was very, very proud of her husband and their life together. There were hundreds of photos of them, looking happy, successful, and very much in love. There was no mention of Emily. No sign of any lingering heartbreak. The report also contained a crucial detail, Sarah's maiden name. A quick search revealed that her father was a senior partner at one of the biggest law firms in the state, the same law firm that was handling the legal work for a massive downtown redevelopment project my company was the lead contractor on. It was a small world, and it was about to get a whole lot smaller. I went back to the wedding website. In the space for Daniel's +1, I typed in a name, Sarah. I found her office address online and entered it as the mailing address for the invitation. I then clicked Send Invitation. A beautiful, calligraphed invitation, paid for by me, was now on its way to Daniel's unsuspecting wife, inviting her to her husband's ex-fiancé's wedding. I imagined the confusion, the questions, the quiet, simmering suspicion that little envelope would generate. It was the first, small crack in their foundation. Next, I focused on our own finances. Like a fool, I had agreed to a joint account for wedding expenses, an account into which I had deposited a substantial six-figure sum. Emily had contributed a small fraction of that, an amount that was more symbolic than significant. I couldn't just drain the account, that would be too obvious, but I could protect my assets. I spent an afternoon with my own lawyer, a man who had helped me navigate complex construction contracts and who was an expert in finding loopholes. We went through every vendor contract for the wedding. Most of them had a force majeure clause, an act of God, provision that would allow for cancellation without losing the entire deposit. We also found that many of the contracts were with companies that had a professional relationship with my firm. A quiet word from me about a family emergency and the potential for future business was all it took. One by one, I began to dismantle the wedding, not by canceling, but by postponing indefinitely. The venue, the caterer, the florist, they all agreed to hold my deposits as credit for a future, unspecified event. I was turning our wedding into a ghost, an apparition that existed on paper but had no substance. While I was quietly gutting the wedding, Emily was blissfully unaware, completely absorbed in the drama of her own making. She told me Daniel had RSVP'd yes. She was giddy with excitement. She talked about the beautiful, healing conversation she would have with him at the reception. She even had the audacity to ask me if I was okay with it, if I was feeling secure. I just smiled and told her I trusted her completely. The final piece of my plan was the rehearsal dinner. It was scheduled for the Friday night before the wedding, at a private room in an upscale restaurant. The guest list was smaller, just the wedding party and immediate family. Daniel, of course, was on that list, and so was his +1. I needed to make sure Sarah would be there. I needed to ensure the explosion happened in the most contained, most impactful way possible. So I took a risk. I reached out to a junior partner at her father's law firm, a man I had a good working relationship with. I told him I had a very sensitive, personal matter to discuss. We met for a drink. I didn't tell him everything. I just told him that a man named Daniel, the husband of one of their firm's rising stars, was on the guest list for my wedding, and that I had reason to believe his presence was not entirely innocent. I told him I was concerned that there might be some professional blowback if a scandal were to erupt. It was all I needed to say. The man understood the language of corporate risk management. He promised to look into it and ensure all parties were aware of the potential optics. I knew he would go straight to Sarah's father, and I knew her father would go straight to her. I hadn't just invited her to the party. I had made her attendance a matter of professional and familial duty. The stage was set. The actors were all in place. All I had to do was wait for the curtain to rise. Update 2. The night of the rehearsal dinner was a masterclass in controlled chaos. The private room at the restaurant was beautiful, all dark wood and soft lighting. My family was on one side, Emily's on the other. Her parents were in their element, holding court, basking in the glow of a wedding they believed would elevate their social standing. Emily was practically vibrating with a nervous, excited energy. She kept glancing at the door, waiting for her guest of honor to arrive. Daniel arrived first, alone. He was exactly as I had pictured him, handsome in a bland, generic way, with the easy, unearned confidence of a man who has never been told no. He and Emily shared a hug that was a little too long, a little too familiar. I watched from across the room, my expression a perfect mask of polite indifference. Emily brought him over to introduce him to me. "Ethan, "This is Daniel," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. "Daniel, this is my fiancé Ethan." We shook hands. His grip was firm, his eyes full of a kind of pitying condescension. He was sizing me up, the man who had replaced him, and he had already found me wanting. "Great to finally meet you, man," he said. "Emily has told me so much about you." "Likewise," I said. "I feel like I know you. It's a brave new world, isn't it? Where fiancés and ex-fiancés can all be one big, happy, mature family." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He wasn't used to his presence being acknowledged so directly. He was used to being the secret, the ghost. Then the door opened again, and Sarah walked in. She was stunning, tall, elegant, dressed in a sharp, impeccably tailored power suit that made her look like she could negotiate a hostile takeover between appetizers. She scanned the room, her eyes sharp and intelligent, and landed on her husband. A slow, cold smile spread across her face. Daniel's blood ran cold. I could literally see the color drain from his face. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost of his own, the ghost of his comfortable, well-funded future. "Sarah," he stammered. What are you doing here?" "What do you mean, darling?" she said, her voice dripping with ice. "I got an invitation, a +1 to be exact. I wouldn't miss it for the world." She walked over to him and gave him a searing, possessive kiss on the lips, her eyes locked on a stunned and horrified Emily. The atmosphere in the room, which had been buzzing with cheerful conversation, went dead silent. Everyone was staring. Emily looked back and forth between Daniel and Sarah, her carefully constructed fantasy of a tearful, romantic reunion imploding in real time. Sarah turned her attention to Emily, her smile widening. "You must be Emily," she said, extending a hand. "Daniel has told me so much about you." It was a lie, of course. A beautiful, vicious lie. "It's so progressive of you to invite your ex to your wedding. Most women wouldn't have the confidence, or the nerve." The dinner that followed was the most excruciatingly awkward social event I have ever witnessed. Sarah was a master of psychological warfare. She dominated the conversation, telling long, detailed stories about her and Daniel's wonderful life together. She talked about the house they were building, their upcoming trip to Tuscany, their plans to start a family. With every word, she was drawing a thick, black line under a single, brutal fact. Daniel was hers. He was not available for closure. He was not a free agent in Emily's emotional psychodrama. Emily just sat there, crumbling. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking. She could barely eat. Daniel looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and die. He kept shooting desperate, pleading glances at me, as if I could somehow save him. I just gave him a small, tight smile and took a sip of my wine. The final blow came during the toasts. My best man gave a heartfelt, funny speech. Emily's maid of honor gave a tearful, rambling one. Then Sarah stood up, her wine glass in her hand. "I'd like to propose a toast," she began, her voice ringing with a false, cheerful sincerity. "To the happy couple. Emily, it takes a special kind of woman to maintain such a powerful connection to her past. And Ethan?" she said, turning to me, her eyes glinting with a newfound sense of alliance. "It takes a very, very special kind of man to be so wonderfully accommodating. May you both get exactly what you deserve." The toast landed like a lead balloon in the silent room. After that, the party fell apart. Emily, on the verge of a full-blown meltdown, made a hasty excuse and practically ran out of the restaurant, her parents trailing behind her, their faces a mixture of confusion and fury. Daniel, after a hissed, whispered argument with his wife, followed them out. I was left sitting at a table with my family and a very smug-looking Sarah. She walked over to my chair, leaned down, and spoke in a low voice that only I could hear. "Thank you," she said. "You have no idea how long I've suspected something was going on. That little invitation was the proof I needed." "You're welcome," I said. "I have a feeling you and I will have a lot to talk about in the coming weeks." She just smiled, a real genuine smile this time. "I have a feeling you're right." Final update. It's been a year. There was no wedding, of course. The day after the rehearsal dinner from hell, Emily and her parents showed up at my house, demanding answers. It was a short conversation. I had my lawyer Ben there with me. I laid out the facts. I told them I knew her request to have Daniel at the wedding was a lie, a final attempt to either win him back or to keep him as a satellite in her emotional orbit forever. I told them the wedding was canceled. and that our relationship was over. Her mother, predictably, launched into a tirade about the money they had spent, the humiliation, the scandal. Ben calmly informed her that most of the major vendors had been postponed and that the financial losses were minimal. He also reminded her that Emily's actions were the sole cause of the cancellation, and that any attempt to sue me would result in a very public and very embarrassing discovery process. The breakup was messy but swift. Emily, deprived of the wedding that was supposed to be the crowning achievement of her life, had a complete and total meltdown. Her parents, more concerned with their own social standing than their daughter's emotional state, were furious with her for causing such a public scene. Daniel and Sarah's story had its own dramatic conclusion. Sarah, armed with the knowledge of her husband's planned infidelity, filed for divorce. Her father's law firm, eager to avoid any association with a messy public scandal, put its full weight behind her. Daniel, faced with the prospect of a legal battle against a corporate Goliath, was forced to agree to a settlement that was, by all accounts, financially devastating for him. He lost the house, the car, and a significant portion of his assets. The last I heard, he's living in a small, rented apartment and has completely fallen out of the high-powered social circle his wife had provided him. As for me, I executed the final phase of my plan. The credits I had with the wedding venue, the caterer, and the florist were not going to go to waste. 2 months after the breakup, I hosted an event. It was a fundraiser for a local charity that supports historic preservation, a cause I'm passionate about. I invited every single person who had been on our original wedding guest list. The event was a huge success. We raised over $100,000 for the charity, and I made a point of publicly thanking my new business partner and the co-chair of the event, Sarah. She and I had, in fact, had a lot to talk about. We discovered a shared passion for business, for strategy, and for a no-nonsense approach to life. After her divorce was finalized, we decided to go into business together, launching a consulting firm that advises on complex legal and logistical challenges in the construction and real estate industries. Our firm is now one of the most successful in the city. We are partners, colleagues, and the best of friends. Nothing more, but that is more than enough. Emily, I've heard, is still living with her parents. She's not dating anyone. Her reputation as a drama queen and a manipulator has made her radioactive in our old social circle. She has, in the end, been left with the one thing she claimed she wanted: closure. The door to her past and to her future has been slammed shut, and she has no one to blame but herself. My revenge wasn't about a single night of chaos. It was about building a better, stronger structure on the ruins of a failed one. And that, I've found, is the most lasting victory of all.